Okay, the second section of the article is entitled Factors Endangering Aboriginal Languages in Canada from Colonialization to Globalization. Um, 7 points in this article. The first point talks about the fact that many Indigenous languages in Canada are in danger. As of 2010, and as of 2010, we've lost 3 languages. This is according to UNESCO's Atlas of the World's Language in Danger. The second point is that the extinct and endangered languages reflect the diversity, the distinctiveness, histories, cultures, and identity linked to family, community, the land, and traditional knowledge. Thirdly, she talks about cultural revitalization of language and culture. Revitalization of language and culture. The challenge to keep your language alive really has to do a lot with the legacy of colonization and the continuing expressions of colonization in our times and place. It's the challenge for an all-pervasive mainstream society with, I think, their unintentional effects of forcing us to think English all the time and moving away from the Aboriginal worldview. It impacts virtually every aspect of individuals, families, communities in the survival of language and culture. So maintaining the language, I guess, is very complex and multi-layered and so forth. Aboriginal languages indigenous to this land cannot depend on immigration or speakers from another land to help us keep the language up. In other words, we can't bring in French people from France to help us improve our French. We're here. And reality says that once our old people or the people can speak the language die, that part is pretty much dead. Now the tragedy of that is language is not just about speaking. I'll just read a few quotes that she wrote. Norris. Language represents a way of thinking and perceiving the world that is interwoven with the knowledge, culture, and identity of a people. Language is a critical component of maintaining and transmitting cultural integrity, identifying from generation to generation. Do you read that? Oh, identity from generation to generation, that's better. And reflects a unique worldview specific to the culture to which it's linked. Losing a language is also losing a world. Okay, loss of language. It really is the loss of an embodied knowledge, skills, worldviews that people have held. Loss of language may not lead to cultural loss, but it certainly makes it more difficult to transmit what the culture is. So the fifth and sixth point are really external factors to the community, to the loss of language. Canada's formal education system is one. Canada's formal education ideology is based on individualism. This goes back a long way. But in order to break the collectivism or the community orientation of most Native students in the 1800s, language was the first target, because you broke the language, you start making people think different, and then you introduce the English language, English concepts, and so forth. And then the pressure for the brain, storage space of all this information has really changed. So the idea of government-sponsored schools as policy was about breaking the links to collectivism, the bonds between the kids, their family, community and tradition. And we all know the story of how kids were punished for speaking the language. The residential schools consequently weaken the process of expression and transmission of culture through language. And it weakened that ability on an intergenerational basis. Now, how to study or how to think about the loss of languages, it's not a simple black and white concept. This loss of language has been happening for a long time. In terms of the Aboriginal languages, it's the loss is related to colonialism, and the loss, the dynamics have happened in other colonial countries, Africa, Asia, and so forth. So we're not alone in this, and that's a good thing, and that's why UNESCO's documents are very helpful to us. So it's a global phenomenon. One cannot oversimplify by saying that the big ex-colonial languages like English, French, Spanish, blah, 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 kill the smaller defensive language. It's not that simple. There's always an interplay of forces. And some of the forces that Norris talks about is history, societal, economic, geographic, and demographic, all of which affect language loss and retention. The other thing that she says about dominant languages is that these mainstream languages, coupled with globalization, urbanization, and their pervasive presence in our lives, they too affect our ability for language, our ability to maintain a language and help it survive. RCAP, the Royal Commission of Aboriginal Peoples, once recommended that an Aboriginal mother tongue should be most spoken at home. Nice idea, but problems are also inherent in that effort. One, life cycle transitions from children to youth. You may be able to speak your language more in the home, but when you get out into the world looking for jobs, perhaps going to the city or whatever, it becomes more difficult to speak your language, and then you lose it, you forget it. It comes back, but you lose some of it, and you lose some of the cultural and experiential reality that comes behind language formation. Whether you live on or off reserve, I lived off reserve and I never learned the language. Family formation. If you don't have access to your grandmother or grandfather who can speak the language, that affects you. Linguistic marriages, when my mother married my father who doesn't speak Algonquin. That was an exogamy, as the cultural anthropologists call it, but it was something where he couldn't speak the language. And finally, entering into the labor force. So all of these internal factors, these factors of trying to live in society today, all affect the retention of